Now. Okay. Hello, Black Praxis readers and watchers. We are very excited for you to join us today because we have a very, very special guest. And before we introduce this guest, let me give a brief introduction of the Black Praxis magazine. Initially birthed out of Dartmouth College Afro-American Society as a newspaper for Black students to have a voice on campus, Black Praxis is in the midst of expanding to be a national organization for radical Black college students to think together and engage with Blackness as a concept. This explains the Black Praxis's new motto. Within the belly of the beast, we consolidate our energies to create an archive of stories by Black people for Black people in hopes of increasing the livability of Black people. With that, my name is Queen Eche. I'm a 24 at Dartmouth College, and I'm the current editor-in-chief for the Black Praxis magazine.
My name is Aaliyah Dungy. I am the Associate Director of Photography and the Associate Editor-in-Chief.
Ian?
My name is Ian Scott. I'm a 24, and I'm the Director of Writing and Illustration.
And right now, we'll set some few ground rules.
Yes, so first is the Zoom is being recorded and will be posted on our YouTube channel. It is not mandatory for your cameras to be on, but we request that you have them on. Two, we will open the floor for spectator questions at 7:15 p.m. In order to get called, please use the raised hand function on Zoom and we will call you to ask questions. We try to accommodate as many questions as possible. However, we will have to stop at 7:45. Please be respectful. It is a big honor to have this guest with us, and please be courteous.
Now for the introduction. Today, we have the honor of interviewing Professor Frank V. Wilderson. He is an award-winning writer, poet, scholar, and activist. He has a BA from Dartmouth, a master's from Columbia, a PhD from the University of California, Berkeley. His memoir, Incognegro, theoretical text, Red, White, and Black, his newest work of Afro-pessimism, along with his numerous essays and poems, established him as one of the most groundbreaking contemporary Black thinkers and writers. He is currently a professor of African American Studies and Drama at UC Irvine. And we are also super excited to mention that during his time at Dartmouth, Professor Wilderson was a former writer for Black Praxis. Professor Wilderson, we are so excited to have you here. And I just want to say, I've been reading your work since I was 13 years old. So it is truly an honor to have you here to talk to you.
Well, that's really great. Can you just tell me what you were doing at 13 to be reading from my work?
I mean, I did debate, but also I just grew up in Asia, so I didn't really know I was Black, if that makes sense. So then when I came here, like the racialization in America is just so different. So I was like, wait, I actually have to read about this, you know? It was just such a different experience that was kind of like I was gravitating towards Black literature, and then I found your work and I was like, okay. Cool.
Well, I'm so happy to be back. When I got kicked out of Dartmouth with 3 classes to graduate, right during finals week of winter quarter for 1978, I said to myself, I'll never come back to that you-know-what again in my life. Unless it's to tear it down, So funny how things change. I actually came back and 2 years later took 3 classes and met the writer Ishmael Reed, who was there for the summer. I don't know. Oh, yes. When did you all, if you're 24s, you probably started in 20. Something like that. Yeah, okay. Well, I think Bill Cook had passed on by then. William Cook was, yeah, okay, he passed on. But anyway, he was the person that really, said I could be a writer and a government major at the same time and introduced me to Ishmael Reed. And then, of course, I got involved with the Black Praxis and Afro-American Society. And so those are basically the 2 things that saved me from 1974 to 1978. And then I had a misadventure, as many of you know, with the Dartmouth Review, because I came back for 2 quarters, and that was like a foolish thing. But yeah, so I'm really glad, and I've skimmed some of the articles. They're quite impressive. Go back and read them thoroughly. I thought to myself, wow, the level of intellectual development as well as layout and presentation has just gone up 10,000% since 1975. You know, I should it's an embarrassment compared to what you're offering out. So my hat is off to you.
Oh, thank you so much. I mean, that's just an honor to hear. And hearing you talk about, you know, your experiences at Dartmouth and the Dartmouth Review in particular, which we've talked about before, like this kind of leads us to our first question. Reading Afro-pessimism and, you know, seeing a glimpse of what your life was like at Dartmouth, it's a stark contrast from now. I told one of my professors that I was interviewing you and they were like, how does it feel to be interviewing a legend? You know, so I mean, how does it feel to be seen as a legend in the eyes of many at Dartmouth now, considering, you know, you just had such negative experiences back then?
I don't know. I'm still processing it. It's there's one of my former students who I think is no longer a student. She's like the next wave of Afro-pessimism, and the you know, I learned from her. Her name is Salamawat Tarefe. She's from Ethiopia. She I mean, why her name is important is because there are few people who are really doing the kind of psychoanalytic part of Afro-pessimism. That would be Salamawat Tarefe, David Marriott, Jared Sexton, and I did a little bit, you know, myself. I'm moving now into, you know, I'm 65, so I'm moving now, trying to finish novels and things like that. But yeah, she was speaking up there and having dinner at the Hanover Inn, and someone said to her, "Oh, Wilderson, you know, we're reading his work and everything like that." A professor, and she said, "But didn't you kick him out?" You know, because Sally, we call her Sally. Sally doesn't have any censors, you know. You know? So yeah, it's hard to imagine. My only this is how things happen. This is how things happen. Nobody wants to when you're Black until they can get something out of you and until you turn them on in some way, or you know, and then they forget all the shit they did to you, you know. So if they have no institutional memory, I've seen this happen with there's a woman at Bucknell who you should check out. Her name is God, my mind isn't working because she's one of my best friends. I just came from I have prostate cancer. I just came from a therapy treatment, which was high intensity of vitamin C in a drip bag that lasts for an hour and a half. And so it makes you kind of loopy. Oh, of course, J. Austin Williams. J. Austin Williams. And you know, she's a major Afro-pessimist dramaturg, playwright, and director. And she teaches at Bucknell. And, you know, she did a play called The Colored Museum. Now, I don't know if George Wolfe agrees with me, but Colored Museum, I think, is an Afro-pessimist play, even though he might not think that. And, you know, at Hanover, here at Irvine, no one gave her any props. They were messing with her and telling, you know, not giving her enough money to do the production. And then it kept selling out and selling out. And the whole drama faculty completely forgot all the shade and obstacles they threw at her and began celebrating her as though they'd given her all this support throughout the whole time. This is just how white people and the white institutions act. They don't have any kind of institutional memory. And we're either objects of their disdain or objects of their pleasure, just depending on what mood they're in and what they need at what particular time. So the answer to your question is, it's kind of funny, because I did tell my father in 1978, I will never go back there. I didn't want to go there to begin with. I'm not, you know, the only reason I went there because the football coaches came out there they started coming out when I was a junior, you know, then you get there. And I'm so happy for Black football players now, because in 1974, 75, 76, they wouldn't even let you play unless they were losing. And we didn't have many on the team. There was like 7 on the freshman team and maybe about 4, like Russell Wilson from the Seahawks, his father was on the varsity. And the only cat who really, his Harry B. Wilson played a lot. And then Reggie Williams, who went to the pros, played. But, you know, they would throw you, they wouldn't let you play quarterback. they didn't want you to play running back, or and they would throw you in when Yale had us down like 20 points in the third quarter. So it was like I could have gone somewhere else and played. I could have gone somewhere else and had a better political experience. I could have gone somewhere else and not had to argue my politics in class all the time. I could have gone somewhere else and not be told when I became chairperson of the Afro-American Society not to do anything political. At the same time, I am who I am because I went there and I fought and I saw the people in the AM, the Shabazz House, who did try to commit suicide. There were a number of suicide attempts, because we hadn't had Black people there for a while, and I felt suicidal. I didn't commit suicide. Now I feel I can deal with any white institution anywhere in the world because nobody can throw at me what they threw at me at Dartmouth. You know what I'm saying?
I'm so sorry. I mean, this institution sucks.
So bring me back in if I'm off track on your questions. I know this is for your YouTube and your publication. Yeah. Okay.
No, I mean, I think you're segueing right into the next question that we have, which again, thank you for coming. Which is, as Black students at Dartmouth, we understand that the school will fuck you up. And so, what we want to know from you, just as a high level thing, and then we can get into some other more detailed questions, is what are the most notable experiences from the things that Dartmouth has thrown at you, and like how have those experiences shaped you into who you are now?
Well, I think that, and it's Ian. Okay, Ian. Yes, I saw your name in the Praxis. I think some articles that you wrote. So, well, I'm just being honest with you. I'm working on a novel, and it's kind of autobiographical and kind of not, and part of it does take place there. And one of the things I just had to come to grips with, and I will say this: not everybody in class of '78 believes like I believe. Not everybody in class of '79, my sister's class, believes like I believe. I don't even know if my sister believes like I believe. We had different. I went to a public school, which was a struggle school, part public, part university lab school, and so half the people who taught were in the anti-war movement. She went to a private prep school that taught people the most important thing, which is not academics about the Ivy League. The most important thing is esprit de corps. And I had not been taught esprit de corps. And so I didn't, well, not only that, but the cats and the women who taught me were actually against the country. So they were against esprit de corps, And I felt afraid. I'm just going to I can say this now because I'm middle class and, I've got here by not copping out too much. There was a period when I was a stockbroker, but, we could talk, but I think one of the most things I felt overall was a sense of inadequacy, that I wasn't good enough, that there was something wrong with me. And I remember, to give you a poignant, kind of detailed example, when I was going on trial for a demonstration it was supposed to occupy Thayer Dining Hall, but we had an interesting political battle in the basement of the AM. The second one, this was 1978. We had one 2 years before, and it was on why should we be supporting the abuses that the workers from Lebanon and different places like that are getting from the school when they call us the N-word all the time, and when we drive out in the country and we see Confederate flags in their bars and that kind of thing. So so it's, in a long story short, someone in Beta, it's in my book, so I won't go into it too deep. Someone in Beta had said, these people from the Appalachian Trail give us frat boys indigestion because there must be a lot of incest in their community. They have facial deformities, and their hands look scarred and things like that, you know. And I work with them in catering in Hanover Inn, and they said, we don't want to eat with hillbillies, basically, you know. And so the dean told the head of fair, okay, make them eat at different times when students aren't around so that their physical form like doesn't offend these rich white kids, you know, I mean, because they put it more genteel than that, right? So when we got a copy of this letter, you know, I think was that we got to throw down in solidarity. But other people were saying, why should we throw down in solidarity with the white working class? And so we compromised, and we said that there would be two people who would rotate into these restricted dining areas where they're made to go to these restricted areas. There, it doesn't look like it looked back then. They kind of modernized it now, but it's really kind of old fashioned, and they had like velvet ropes for different parts of it, you know. And so they used to be able to eat whenever they wanted to, wherever they wanted to. Now they made these white working class people eat in these special areas where no students had to look at them. So we just said, well, 2 Black students will go into these areas throughout the day and eat with them in solidarity. And so when I went, Dean Manuel had me and my friend Bill Lewis arrested, and we were put in jail. So the city of Hanover did not want to press charges after the next day after they let us out, but Dartmouth just vamped on us. I mean, it was just bizarre. And the long story short is that my father had to fly from Minneapolis, and Bill's father flew from Columbus, Ohio, because they were like gonna do this expulsion thing. When you get expelled from one Ivy League school, you can't go to any other for anything. So we're sitting in the dean's office. I think I forget all the buildings on it. It might be McNutt or something like that, you know. Okay, it is, okay. And my dad, at that point, was a professor, and he was vice president of student affairs at the University of Minnesota. And student conduct was under him. So he says to the dean, he says, so what is the range of sanctions that this trial could possibly produce to my son? You know, and the dean says, I didn't tell you that. You know, and my dad says, you know, if I have a student on trial, on student conduct trial, and a parent comes to me and says, what he's being charged with and what's the range of sanctions, and I tell him, I don't have to tell him that, I could be sued. And so, Ian, direct answer to your question is, this cat says to my dad, he says, look, we're the Ivy League, okay? You're a state institution. You know, he says, we are Dartmouth College, you are the University of Minnesota, okay? He says, we own more land in the state of New Hampshire than the state of New Hampshire. He says, so tomorrow, when your son goes on trial, he could get anything from probation to double probation, to probation with a letter, to 1/4 suspension, to a 3/4 suspension, to a year suspension, to an indefinite suspension, to an expulsion. And we will decide that tomorrow, you know. So I was like, okay, this is power. This is like, you know, these are the people who rule the world, you know. And part of me was like really tripped out, you know, but the other part of me was kind of happy because, you know, he used to say to me, when you and your sister come home from school, she talks about school in one way, you talk about school in another way. I don't understand how y'all going to the same school. You know? And so, you know, and so he was like, I can't believe he said that to me. He's walking around, you know, his Democratic Party neoliberal self. I can't believe he said that's not constitutional. That's not constitutional. I said, dude, Mao Zedong says power comes from the barrel of a gun. This dude just told you. You know, and so I was like, how do you say that to me? He can't. You just can't. You know, that's like a fascist state. You can't do. He said, I said, Dad, you can do that. Okay. He told you. You know, so you know, the other cool part about it was, that was 1978, March. I had bounced a check in 1975, somewhere down on Main Street. Completely forgotten about it. Completely forgot about it. The merchants had forgotten about it. This will explain to you the interconnectedness of Ivy institutions and the intelligence state, and the intelligence community. The merchant had forgotten about it. I had forgotten about it. Okay. And so I get another letter for another trial based upon this bounced check, which they had helped the merchant calculate fees, and they had calculated the fees to make it over $100 to make it a felony as opposed to misdemeanor. Okay. And so, so now I got these two big whammies against me, that had just dug up and was underneath my door, right there in the am, cutter hog, and then my friend Bill, he got another letter for like larceny or theft, grand theft, something like that, and for stealing furniture. And he couldn't figure out what it was, and then the dates, and then he figured out, oh, some cat from Boston University had come up to see us, and he had taken cushions from the lounge and put them in his dormitory room on the floor and let the dude sleep on the cushions. But he brought them back to the lounge. So what I'm trying to say is, how did they know all this? Okay? How do they know all this? And they finally told me, so he had this letter for an extra charge for theft of university property. I had this extra charge for the felony of bouncing this check. And when we get to the trial, he says to me, we've actually had a team of psychologists tracking you and a select other individuals for the past 4 years. And they have determined that you have not inculcated the esprit de corps by the institution. I never met these people, okay? So this is like, you're never alone at Dartmouth College. They're like,
Yeah, no, that, and the line that you're saying about fascism, it's like what George Jackson said, it's already here, and we see this today still. We're like talking about vote out fascism and stuff. It's already here. But you kind of brought us directly into the next question, which was just, how do you look back, on that action on behalf of dining workers, from the sort of political standpoint that you are now? Like, how do you, look back on that, Frank Wilderson in 78, with all that you've experienced in the time since?
Yes, that's a very good question. That episode, the politics of it has followed me around, and I found it repeated inside of the African National Congress, with the white radicals in the African National Congress becoming more and more hegemonic, and the Black radicals finding a lesser powerful voice inside of our political organizations under the umbrella, as certain things happened, as Winnie Mandela was marginalized by Nelson Mandela, as Chris Hani was assassinated, as the moderates returned from exile. Nelson Mandela made an agreement with de Klerk that he would let flow in the exiles from Toronto, New York, London, Paris, and first to establish the political party, and then the exiles from Cuba and North Korea and Soviet Union would come in second and not be as powerful inside of our own party. And what that did is it gave a lot more power to either white voices, or white people, or the ideas of neoliberalism. And I think that one way of thinking about that is to say, well, I made a mistake in supporting those workers. And I think that today I might think about it a bit differently. On the other hand, Afro-pessimism is an analysis of Black suffering. It is not a denial of other people's suffering. So I think that what Dartmouth, looking back, has helped me do is say, these people flowing in from all these areas like Lebanon and stuff like that to do work here for the capitalist class are suffering capitalist exploitation. And they're stone racist and anti-Black racists at the very same time. And I am against their suffering. I don't want them to suffer, but I'm also against their anti-Blackness. I think that Black people all over the world, and I've met Black people for 5 years in Africa, I've met Black people in Vienna who are Viennese, I've met, Black people in German who are Afro-Germans, and French-speaking Black people in Canada. And we all have this kind of thing where we extend more compassion to other people than they extend to us. I don't know what to do about that. But that was part of where I was. Right now, as I age, I'm interested in finding a way to speak to and speak about Black suffering and not be caught up as a refugee in other people's projects, unless they're willing to take my suffering into their project.
Yeah, thank you. And then finally, just from me, I have one more question, and we're already moving in the direction of it. Just that at several points in your life, you have turned away from the aspirations of the Black middle class, such as quitting your stockbrokering gig to being then, working in, I think it was a country club, where those same coworkers were, working at, and that's sort of the destiny of so many, Black Dartmouth students. And then, especially through joining, the ANC and stuff like that, rejecting this push that Dartmouth is trying to produce this Black middle class in America. And so what does this class traitorism mean for you, and how do you locate it in your understanding of anti-Blackness?
That's a very hard question. I'm still struggling with it. So I'm going to be honest with you so that you don't feel the kind of guilt and anxiety after graduation that I felt in doing different things. If you have to do them, it's hard to impossible to be Black in this world. It just is, and I'm very happy with my life over the past however many years it is since the 70s. But I also have to say that I wasn't happy for most of that life. So when I'm saying I'm happy for it now, I wasn't happy for most of it as it was going along. And the only thing I'm proud of is that I continued to do that I was passionate about, which is creative writing. And I did that really seriously. So Ian, I guess what I'm trying to say is it's hard for me to answer this question. If there are people in my class and my sister's class who are millionaires, okay? Now, I have pretty good health. Even though I have prostate cancer, I don't need the operations people had because of it, but because I've long ago gotten off of red meat and sugar and alcohol and things like that, which has produced a 65-year-old metabolism, which is almost like a 40-year-old. On the other hand, and I've gone away from conventional doctors, there's a guy that you should actually look into. His name is Sheldon Caesar. He's class of 78, and he's a medical doctor in Chicago. We used to travel to Brazil and stuff like that. And he is a alternative medicine medical doctor, trained as a regular doctor, did pre-med at Dartmouth, and then became a regular doctor, and realized that regular medicine was actually not preventative medicine, was not helping the immune system. So I deal with him a lot. And he has a website now, and he'll talk to you about he's actually trained his own eyes at 65 to not need his prescription glasses anymore. He's healed himself from the inside out. And so my alternative journey has taken me away from conventional food, away from conventional doctors, and has made me extremely healthy. So Ian, you can see that's the good news. The bad news is that I make $171,000 per year, which is, and I make about $25,000 to $30,000 in speaking fees and royalties, which is good money, but that's chicken change for a lot of people in my class, okay? I'll tell you that right now, black and white, that is some chicken change, okay? And so I got friends who are making $300,000 a year. Now they're going to die before me because their arteries are going to harden and they got to do too many cocktails at lunch and stuff like that. And they're working too hard. But if I had stayed as a stockbroker, I'd be making $312,000 per year right now. Okay. But I was also developing an ulcer. So it's really, and the other thing about it is I'm happy about having traveled around the world and have all these experience and worked in these political organizations. But my retirement could be $13,000 a month, and right now, but if I retire right now, it will be $7,000 a month. So you see what I'm saying? If you stay in one place with a Dartmouth degree after your Dartmouth degree for 40 years, you come out with buku cash, but you also come out as a widget of that machine. And I can tell you about my experience. I can't tell you what to do in life. It's a hard thing to think about. Wherever you do in life, wherever you go, I would just say keep reading and have an alternative space. When I was a stockbroker, I was the first Black stockbroker in the state of Minnesota. One thing I learned is don't walk into a financial institution with a book from the library. I had to learn it the hard way. I was 24 years old. What are you, stuck up? You don't want to go to happy hour. You don't want to the strip club with us. You don't want to go here. You don't want to, what? I'm going to the library. And then you don't have any friends. People come down, they treat you like shit on the job. So, you just have to have your persona here. And then I go to the Mozambique Liberation support networks and the Zimbabwean support networks and my creative writing classes afterwards, and not tell the people at work what I was doing. It's like you got to eat, you got to have money. I am glad I didn't think about retirement because I would not have done what I did. But you do have to think about retirement because no one takes care of you after this age. Did I get too off track, Ian? Or?
No, I think I would love to hear you talk more on this question, but I do want to move things along so that my friends here can get to the other questions that we have, and then everybody can ask you some questions before the night gets too late. But yeah.
So my questions are a little bit more theoretical. We've heard you say this term a lot, and we really wonder what it means to you. What do you mean by pessimism of the intellect, but optimism of the will?
Okay, well, that's a good question. And who's the professor? Naboko? How do you pronounce it?
Her last name, or Naboko Sakafia-Lenik?
Naboko asked, she brought up Afro-pessimism, which was not the Afro-pessimism of Saidiya Hartman, Jared Sexton, myself, and others. It was a thing that was done in the 80s, which was a social science kind of right-wing critique of Africa. And but how this came about is a group of activists in grad school, Jared Sexton, Zakiya Iman Jackson was there a little bit later, Kiana Ross, who teaches at Northwestern, Sora Han, H-A-N, who's at UC Irvine, myself, and we were seeing how Black people were bringing in symptoms of suffering into multiracial coalitions that was different than the suffering of Latinx and Asian people, and how they were being shut down. So that's what we were seeing experientially in our political organizations in Oakland. In our classes on psychoanalysis and Marxism, we were seeing how the description of what it means to be oppressed flattened out to the point where it was really difficult at first, and we realized impossible to think these rubrics through Blackness without their having limitations. So in other words, we're not like anti. We're not saying that all Western thought needs to be thrown out, because Western thought is everywhere, and so is African thought. It's just that it's not recognized as being everywhere. Okay, but we're saying that we're pessimistic of the intellectual production that comes out of Marxism and psychoanalysis in its attempt to universalize suffering. So that's what we mean by pessimism of the intellect. And optimism of the will is a kind of optimism of the capacity, the kind of intellectual and emotional capacity of Black people on the ground to throw down. That's really what we mean, to set it off. Like, we take inspiration and from certain moments, and the inspiration that we take from those moments, we try to turn those moments into a kind of theoretical question. Like the spectacle of a police station burning in my hometown, Minneapolis, as opposed to thinking of it as good or bad. Like, this is a very interesting response. This is finally this, a correct response to the source, as opposed to saying, why don't you all young people direct your energy somewhere else, thinking about the intelligence that comes out of that response, and how can our work be informed by that. So I ripped that off, that phrase, from Antonio Gramsci's The Prison Notebooks. And basically what he means is that he, like Marx, is pessimistic of an economic analysis of capitalism that grows out of a bourgeois community, but he's optimistic with respect to the capacity and the energy of the working class to occupy factories and shut down production.
I guess this also kind of leads me to that next question, where you're talking about being optimistic of, doing things, optimistic of changing the conditions that Black people are living in, So then that makes me wonder, as we are working towards changing those conditions, what does a world outside of Black suffering, being the centerfold of civil society, look like to you? And I feel like that's such a big question. But it's something that we've kind of looked to your work, to Calvin Warren, Sexton, Hartman, Spillers. It's still something that we're kind of like, so where do we go from here?
Oh, where you go is where you are. You are going there. Your edition of Black Praxis is one of the cars on the train. The fact that we are here together in 2022, when in 1981, 82, the recruitment office called me. I was a broker in Chicago at that time, and they said, "Look, we run the numbers. We got to have 10% Black kids every fall. We get 10% by going to private schools. So stop going to Kenwood School in Chicago. Stop going to these public schools where we would go and give talks, why you should think about Dartmouth. And here's a list of prep schools where you can go to, where they might have 1 or 2 Black kids in the whole school. You can recruit them, and we can build, like 100 per year out of that." And basically what they were saying is, we can get these type of Negroes, and we won't have any attitude problems, like we've been having in the 1970s. And I thought to myself, wow, that's the death of everything we tried to do, but it's not, because look at y'all. So there's something to that. There's something to the fact that, yes, there are some Black young teenagers who go through these prep schools and are properly prepped. and there's other who's come out with more rage than anybody in South Central LA, and so, but they all got pressure on the brain, from having been through that experience. It's just, how are they going to react to it? How are they going to live it? And so what I feared in 1981 and 1982, beginning of Reagan, didn't actually happen. I mean, it may have happened a bit, because it was happening then with our splits on our arguments about actions and things like that. But the fact that they haven't gotten 100 Black people per year who are just what they wanted, just what they said they wanted in 1982 is pretty good. Repeat your question, please, Queen, because I want to be sure
what does a world outside of Black suffering look like?
Okay, so I don't think, and that's why psychoanalysis, feminism, indigenism, post-colonialism, Marxism have two rhetorical structures. One is the description of the problem, and one is the answer to Lenin's question, the prescription of what is to be done. And Afro-pessimism looks disabled because it never offers that other part, the prescriptive gesture. There's no prescriptive gesture. And that produces a certain amount of emotional anxiety in the reader. It also produces emotional anxiety in the writer. I can tell you this, I am very happy where reefer is legal, so I don't have to be smoking it up in the am, wondering whether the campus police are for now 60 years, okay? And
Ooh, Professor Wilderson, your Wi-Fi might be.
Are you not hearing me?
Yes, just we heard you that second.
Okay.
I think it might be good now.
Okay.
Yes. Wait, it's still a little bad.
Oh.
Ian made the joke. This is Phil's too.
Yeah. It's Phil.
Phil Hamlin, the president of Dartmouth.
Oh, he was 77, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, I kind of remember that dude, yeah.
We make jokes that he kind of ruins everything.
Let me know how I'm doing, and I'll keep, if I should keep going or not.
Yes, you seem to be good right now. Yeah.
Okay. So the simple, without being too simplistic, is that where we are wasn't always true. Am I okay now? Just go like this if you can't hear me. And at any point if you can't hear me. Okay. I do not want to sound like I'm negative about Blackness. Blackness has given the world everything with respect to a liberatory imagination. There's just really nothing in the 20th century that could happen in terms of mass political movements that if Black resistance to slavery, Black resistance to Jim Crow, and Black resistance to the prison industrial complex, Black resistance to lynching wasn't around. Everybody draws on us like parasites. Okay, so that's the power that we have. We are the center of the world, and that's not like being a rose. We're the center of everyone's anxiety. We're the center of everyone's thought. We're the center, and we weren't always Black. Now, when I say that, to answer your question, the end of the world, as Fanon says in Black Skin, White Mask, is the end of Blackness. It's also the end of humanness. It's not that there's something bad about us that needs to be destroyed. It's the technologies of captivity, the nature of gratuitous violence, the fact that we exist in the libidinal economy, the collective unconscious. We exist in the collective unconscious as phobic objects, which are different than the phobic nature of the Jew or the Native American. They exist as phobic objects based upon the threat of their agenda. The threat of their agenda, an anti-Semitic portrayal of what a Jewish domination would look like, an anti-Indian portrayal of what a Native American polity would look like. There's no such agenda that organizes anti-Black anxiety. It's Black flesh and Black genitals. It's the fear of a Black nation, okay? And so it's a totalizing phobic energy that we catalyze in the brain of every country in the world. Every country in the world, everywhere you go. I was a Maoist, total Maoist. And I was shocked in 1975 in my sophomore year to read about Chinese male students beating up 3 African students in a cafeteria because they tried to date Chinese women. I didn't want to believe that, okay? Did not want to believe that. I still support Cuba. I still love Castro, but I was shocked to spend 6 weeks in Cuba and feel and see and experience the symptoms of anti-Blackness. I have to have private meetings with Black Cubanos about what's going on in the country that has done more to liberate Africa than any other country outside in any part of the world. So I dig so much about Cuba. I dug so much about China. I spent 2.5 weeks in the Soviet Union and dug so much about them and experienced anti-Blackness there. It's just part of what organizes civil society. And so our liberation is so comprehensive that a sentence cannot be written about it, like communism or an indigenous world. We will be on the cusp of an epistemological catastrophe, which will lead us into a whole new way of thinking, a way of thinking before the Arabs of 625 AD rocked up on East Africa and said, we don't care about your names, we're going to call you Black. And it will be a new dispensation where our bloodlines will still exist, just like our bloodlines exist with the Bantu peoples before 625. But our paradigmatic position of being comprehensively oppressed will be different. And we might be called something paradigmatically different. That can't be imagined because it's beyond semiotics. It's beyond language. We would be fortunate to be Indians, to be abused for being recalcitrant, as Andrew Jackson said, meaning they don't want to give me their land, so I'm going to massacre them. But nobody asks, oh, are you Black and recalcitrant? So I'll kill you? No, just are you Black? That's all it has. There's no contingency. And that's the horror. That's to be on the other side of that is to be in a world that is possible, but not discursively, conceptually coherent. I could never say what that looks like. But I know that you all are giving me hope that we can get there. You came through a policy change of 1982 and you're here. You're not supposed to be here.
So with that, I have the last question, and it's about, so hearing your experiences with the Black Praxis, and as you said, it saved you. I just want to know for this coming issue and for future issues, how we can utilize the Black Praxis as a medium for community and to increase the livability of Black students. So, with your experience with the Black Praxis, how can we create this community in this safe space on campus?
That's a very good question. I'm very sorry. I see. What is your name again?
Aaliyah.
Aaliyah. Yes. A lot of that really depends upon the intra-Black social dynamics on campus as it is now. Yeah, I see Queen. I'm going to say this kind of facetiously. The nice thing about 1974, 75, 76, 78, the nice thing about the last early, mid, and late 70s, and I mean this a bit facetiously, was the intensity of our isolation. We just had to be with each other. Because if there was a snowstorm and the antenna went down on that mountain, there's no TV and there's hardly any radio, and you can't get out of Dodge, you know. I was there in 2016, and a bus came from the Boston Logan Airport all the way to the Hanover Inn. You couldn't do that back then. I mean, I was like, what is this? You know, you know, you had to go to White River Junction, get somebody to take you there. You know what I'm saying? It's like, boy, these people are living large. You know what I'm saying? It's like, so we were so isolated that we all had to be together. That's one thing. The other thing was that there were very few of us who were rich. So that was, you know, like my parents were professors, and that was considered like money, you know, which they were scraping for loans and stuff to get us tuition paid and everything, you know. So times have really changed. The Black people nationwide have become far more impoverished than they were in the 1970s, and far richer than they were in the 1970s. I have, you know, I won't call her a friend. I'd like to call her a friend. You know, she didn't call me a friend, just because we different. You know, class of '79. Pam Joyner. You know, she's got $79 million. You know, so like when she comes to my neighborhood, she hangs out with that Lucas cat who made the movies. You know, she didn't come to my crib. We used to live in the Am. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, so she can send her kids. She says, "What? A Dartmouth check? Yeah, I'll write this off and a donation." You know, that's what $80 million in cash will do for you. You know, her first husband, Gary Love, owns an investment bank. We were all poor back then. You know, and now, what we did was in the I think it's the living room where the mural is. We would have readings from the Praxis when it came out, and so people would be gathered all around, you know, and be sitting on the ledges on couches and stuff like that, you know. And I very distinctly remember I published a poem, I think, and someone came in with a bass, you know, and played bass while I read poetry, and people would read articles. We discussed the articles, and that would lead to maybe someone had a little record player and brought it downstairs and put on The Ballad of the Bullet, and we listened to that and then discuss it. So we would just have, and the Praxis was not anywhere near as sophisticated as y'all have done, but we would just open it up and read to each other from it, and it'd be like a reading circle. So that was one thing. There was also a drama group called Buddha, I think. Is it still happening? Okay. And they put on for colored girls who have considered suicide when the end of the rainbow isn't enough when it first came out. And we would have discussion groups about that. So it was really the fact that it was hard to get anywhere off campus. There was no internet or anything like that. And we were always together. And the Praxis was a focal point when it came out, maybe of doing some readings from it in the living room and then discussing. But things have probably changed. Maybe the community is more fragmented, maybe not. I don't really know what the situation is.
It's way more fragmented.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you a little joke. The first time this is how the height of fragmentation for me. I lived in Fairweather. It was North Fairweather. And so I rocked up in a station wagon, not new, not old, just normal family station wagon, all my brothers and sisters and everything, you know, unpacked little school supplies, stuff like that, you know. Another roommate who from a single parent whose mother was working class. They always put black people together back in the 70s. We wanted to be together. So he came with a duffel bag. That's all he had. No supplies. And holes in his shoes. He was the one. And this other cat drove up, and he was only child, and his mother had. It was like August. Sorry, this is not my alarm. I'm sorry. It was like August, and I can't get this off. Excuse me one second. Yeah, okay. His mother came. They drove up in a Jaguar, and his mother had a fur coat on, and his dad was in like his pinstripe suit, and they had a poodle that had a better haircut than I've ever had. Okay. And so, I said, well, goddamn, where's this Negro from? It's like, and the poodle was perfectly trained and everything, just sat down, got up, and he had all his little instruments and everything, little calculators, and everything was his, and he didn't want nobody to touch it. That was the level of, he was such an oddball that, because there was very few other people like that. Things have changed, things have changed very much so.
Well, as we see in the comment section, sorry guys, we ran 10 minutes a little late, but now we're opening it up to the floor. So if you guys could raise your hands and we'll call on someone to ask Frank a question. Sorry, hold on. How do I? Gotcha. Oh, so Jordan, just go ahead.
Okay. Hi. Super happy to. Hi. Yes, it's nice to talk to you in person, or I guess virtually, however that works. But I'm super happy to be here. Black Praxis holds a special place in my heart. I'm a 21 for those of you who never met me at Dartmouth. So it's nice to see how everything is going. And my question is based partly on the talk you did with the DPU, but I was wondering, since you spoke about the Black intra-war that took place during your time at Dartmouth, how you think that AP, I guess what it offers as far as a framework for thinking about Black resistance to revolutionary politics or potentially Black collusion with anti-Black structures, and how we generally think about ideas of like betrayal or disloyalty within the Black community, how AP's understanding of anti-Blackness either challenges, like I guess our thinking of disloyalty as being kind of so individual, and to something that's a little bit more maybe collective or structural or psychic even.
Yes, and again, thank you for that. So Jordan, I would like, maybe you could unmute yourself and you could, tell me what you think, because I know you're working on a PhD and you're probably more steeped in the literature now than I am. I'm on medical leave and I'm writing fiction. So I'll say that I want to have this interchange with you to see what your thoughts are, because I know you've been thinking about this. I'll start off by saying that I think the work of Sally Tarefe is really, really important. She and I did a workshop for about 40 Black activists in London on Afro-pessimism at the Tate Modern Museum. And she began her workshop by saying, how many of you think that right now we are in a Black intramural space? And about 99% of the people raised their hand. And she said, I'm wrong. I'm going to do the psychoanalytic part of this workshop. Frank is doing the political economy part. And, part of what she was trying to say was not condemning the workshop, because we're all happy to be here. But what she was saying is that getting back to her work and Sexton's work and David Marriott's work, which all builds on Fanon and others, is and Horton Spiller's, which is that unfortunately the Black unconscious is structurally anti-Black, just like the non-Black unconscious. And in Frantz Fanon's War, which is a chapter in David Marriott's On Black Men, one of the things that he's trying to say that Fanon is struggling with is this notion of hallucinatory whitening or lactification, the sense that my own image to me in the mirror is something I could say I'm Black and I'm proud in my preconscious discursive way, which is in psychoanalysis is called secondary processes of signification. But in primary processes of signification, which is the language of dreams and the unconscious, I'm also saying to myself at the very same time, I am a thing to be feared. And so that notion of myself being a thing to be feared and garrisoned against actually comes out symptomatically in our intra-Black relations, in love, in politics, and just when we're by ourselves. I don't feel that that's a reason to condemn ourselves for that. I think it's what I've had to learn over the years is to be what I couldn't do when I was chair of the Afro-American Society is be compassionate to those people on the other side, even while I'm fighting them. And to try to understand that though they are acting out the anti-Blackness that is in us all, we're all suffering in the same way. So I want you to come back at me because there may be ways in which I'm going around the question or certainly not getting right to the heart of it. And you could say something about it. I also want to hear your thoughts. You've been thinking about it and reading on this.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm really interested, I guess, in moving away from, I guess, our thinking about betrayal as something that is just like about personality or like an individual kind of cowardice, but something that is like potentially structurally produced and that like exists like on a psychic level as you spoke to. And so that's something I've been thinking about a lot in terms of like the way that like structural precarity actually like makes it very difficult for people to be loyal to one another in the ways that we construct loyalty to exist. And I guess some of the ways that I've been thinking about that are like cases like Fred Hampton, where you have like a Black informant that is like assisting in his assassination. There's like one way of looking at that case where it's like, okay, William O'Neill is evil and horrible and like we can condemn him for his action, but there's a broader story to be told about his individual precarity to the state and how the state like actually like pounced on him in that particular moment and took advantage of his vulnerability and how he ultimately becomes a casualty of their anti-Black violence too. And in time, he also dies and like he goes into witness protection and like has to like get his face changed because of how many people recognize him after the assassination. And so like he literally like also loses his quality of life over the course of the few years that he lives after Fred Hampton's assassination. But like cases like that make me feel like maybe betrayal is like, we need something like a bigger words than we have per se for thinking about precarity.
I think you're so right. I'm glad you spoke to that because I like your answer better than mine. Yeah, really, 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 really. And you know, in a way that maybe I didn't hit the nail on the head too hard in my new book, Afro-Pessimism. What you just said, Jordan, is exactly the rubric that I was working out of for the chapter called Mario's, which is about a restaurant where I worked in South Africa. So yes, I mean, there are two Zulus who are part of a Contra group that is literally massacring ANC Black people. They work in the kitchen. And there's the woman who they accuse of stealing money, and I say I'll help her, and then she faints because she's so terrified of what does that mean? We're going to fight these white people, and then she tells them everything I've been doing, and And then there's me thinking that I can just throw it on wherever I go in the world. All those people are crazy. In other words, they're all living that precarity that you talked about. And so betrayal is, yes, it is too puny and not an accurate enough word, even though in my practice, I don't want to do to someone what she did to me, even though I understand her fear. And even though I don't want to be like those two cats in the kitchen, who are massacring people, even though I understand that in KwaZulu-Natal, they are the poorest Black people in South Africa and constantly manipulated. And so, yes, exactly. Thank you for that.
Leah?
Hi, so I'm a debater and I came into contact with Afro-pessimism in debate, and it's become kind of a core aspect of my, I think, identity in debate. Debate within itself is a competitive activity. We do things to get wins and losses. However, I still experience like extremely large levels of anti-Blackness in that space. And there's tons of debaters in this call that I've had numerous conversations about and how they experience the same. My question would be, there's many in the debate space who bastardize or co-opt Afro-pessimism without engaging in it ethically outside of the space. What are your opinions on using Afro-pessimism in debate? What are ways we can improve our relationship to Afro-pessimism? And in general, just how do you kind of grapple with how your theory has been utilized in a competitive space like debate?
Well, that's a very good question. The sad answer is that we don't own our intellectual production any more or less than we own our bodies. Our music belongs to them. Our dance belongs to them. Our bodies belong to them. And then we think that we get a critique of our suffering belongs to us, and we find out it too belongs to them. I mean, it's just it's a hard thing to it's a hard thing to look at. It hit me like a nasty gym shoe upside the head one day in a seminar when there's a professor who's a major Afro-pessimist theorist named Patrice Douglas she's now at UC Berkeley. And she's sitting in a seminar, and I'm teaching this, and she's getting very angry at this white cat who's like getting all Afro-pessimist and coming off with all this stuff, And as a professor, I can't say, you know what, you really need to cool your jets, guy. And you can't talk, you can't express how much you understand, And so she then starts signifying. She says, how do we keep Afro-pessimism our own, keep it Black? And I just felt the pain in that question. And I just thought to myself for a moment, because I'd just been from Europe, where all these people in Germany and France are getting all into it, it's just all sexy. And I said, Patrice, we can't. It's like jazz, it's like hip hop. Once we do it, it belongs to them. It's their possession for their pleasure, for their development, whatever. My own. So what I have done. So that's my answer. But I will also say that there's one white cat who didn't do this, and he was a debate trainer and a debate instructor and a debate coach rather, and a debater, and he lives in China now. And if you actually email me, maybe I can find his dissertation. He wrote a dissertation on the blackening of the debate world, moving through the various eras to Afro-pessimism. He hasn't published it, so it's just a dissertation in print form. His name is David Peterson. And so one of the things that I got while I was on his dissertation committee was, as Black people in debate make interventions important to Black people who are Black debaters, and non-Black debaters take it on to see how we can make it fit for our agenda. That's the negative. But the positive is that more Black debaters start organizing and talking to each other over the years and trying to find a way to blacken the structure of debate. So back in like 2008 or something like that, there was a big brouhaha, which comes as a result of Black resistance, where these cats from Northwestern and other places were saying, we need to eliminate Afro-pessimism from debate because it interrogates the question, and the debate is about answering the question. And just to push them to that brink is something positive for us. So I think the debate world, Blackness has won some significant battles in it. George Soros financed debate camps in the early 21st century. And what he didn't know was he became like the Amazon for the distribution of Afro-pessimism, because all he's thinking is like, I'm gonna be a good neoliberal white cat, and put these little debate camps in the inner city, in the ghetto in Detroit and in Chicago here, help these Black kids get to college, stuff like that, Well, we didn't have a distribution network. Thank you, George Soros, because your debate camp set our shit all over the world, you know what I'm saying? And so we just have to be guerrilla about it, and win as many small fights and take advantage and be parasites of their shit. Like I always say, I'm a professor here, but I'm really a parasite of the institution, so I can just suck its resources to do what I want to do in the world, But you are so right, Rhea. The moment Blackness animates the imagination like nothing else, I studied movies, or in my second book, I was like, damn, every time people have sex on screen, do I have to listen to Black music? Well, because it's orgasmic. It's like this is music coming from people with nothing to lose. Everybody wants some of that energy, for the bedroom, for the revolution. They don't want us. They just want what we can give them for what they need to do. And if there are ways in which we can take advantage of those scenarios, then that would be good. And I think Black debaters have made their mark simply by producing a way of talking that interrogates the question rather than answering it. That's revolutionary right there.
Thanks for answering that.
Giovanni, is that correct?
Yes, thank you. So my name is Giovanni Thompson, also a debater at Texas Southern University, but I actually kind of want to extend the question back to the first speaker and kind of talk about a little bit about class traitorism, if that's okay with you. I know you spoke about earlier in your segment about living double lives. Is that mentality rooted in anti-Blackness, and do the ideas of like code switching and rearranging your culture to fit in, uphold the hegemonic ideas that of like suppressing Black bodies and experiences? And does that, how does that structure further in the Black culture?
Well, Giovanni, maybe I could ask you to unmute yourself like I did Jordan, and you could tell me a little bit more about where the question comes from for you and what your thoughts are. I feel that in the past 50 years that I've been working, I've done all kinds of different ways of being to that question. So maybe tell me a little bit more about what your hotspot is with that question.
Yeah, of course. So I kind of caught in the middle of this. So of course, like I feel like I've grown up in the semi-middle class, the Black middle class, but I feel alienated by Blackness. And so that double life structure and rekindling that within like HBCU is kind of something I've been working at, throughout my college experience. But I asked this question kind of because I feel like the double life mentality kind of, like you said about the debate, kind of makes it more antagatory towards, lower Black class citizens. And I think it stratifies, not only is there financial stratification between like your upper rich class Black Americans and then your lower rich class, there's a cognitive disconnect between the two. And I feel like that you sort of get this mentality. I've witnessed the mentality that kind of, as a separation or rejection of their Blackness, the higher they get up in these, social financial ladder. And I wonder if, Afro-pessimism can be adopted within the higher upper echelon of finances. Like,
oh, I understand the question. I always start off my graduate courses by saying, especially the Afro-pessimist seminar that I normally give in winter. I'm not teaching this course, but I say, if you don't have a nervous breakdown by the time you finish your PhD, then you haven't done the work. Because this is, and then the undergraduate courses, I start off by saying, nothing in this course will help you get a job. And if you manage to get a job, you certainly won't keep it by anything that I teach you here. I'm joking, but Afro-pessimism is an analysis of Black suffering, as Jordan and I were having that dialogue. Afro-pessimism is not a kind of set of postulates about how you could suffer less. And as Sally Salamalo-Terefe always says, if you want to know how to live your life, don't read Afro-pessimism. It will only help you understand your life. And it may bring you to the razor blade point, where it brings you down so low that it's razor blades and alcohol, But I swear, if you don't do that and you come up out of it, you'll have a glowing kind of X-ray vision of the world. This is something that I could not have thought through had I stayed a banker. It just couldn't happen. I mean, the daily psychic hydraulics of going to Merrill Lynch every day, simply, even going to the library, it didn't allow for me to think this, because as my father said, and he's a liberal Democrat psychologist, he said, if I actually accommodated that loopy Alice in Wonderland theory of yours, by which he meant Afro-pessimism. Yeah, this loopy Alice in Wonderland theory is all over the world, Jack. Now this is like before, If I actually accommodated that loopy Alice in Wonderland theory, I have no other choice but to leave Minneapolis, go to Washington D.C., get a gun, kill every white person in sight. I said, dude, don't be so hyperbolic. He says, how is that hyperbolic? I said, you wouldn't have to go all the way to Washington, So, so I'm joking with you, Giovanni, and I want you to talk to me if I'm getting off track with you. But I'm shocked and happy at how this has been so important to Black people worldwide. All we wanted to do was have a way of talking and debating comrades who are not Black in interracial coalitions in Oakland, number one, and a way of checking our Marxist and psychoanalytic professors when they were saying everybody suffers in the same way, checking them in the classroom. That's all I want to do. Then the books got published and they kicked off. This cannot help you live your life in any type of institutional setting. It just can't, because if you actually think about the foundation of Afro-pessimism, it is not against aspects of discrimination in the world. It is against the entire world as it is constituted. So Giovanni, talk to me a little bit and see if I'm getting off track or on track, or how I'm answering your question.
Yeah, I think you're on track. I would just, during the entire conversation, I had your quote that, Blackness is conterminous with slaveness. And so I think that there shouldn't be like a monetary, once I've hit this tax bracket, I'm no longer a slave. I'm no longer suffering. And so I want to maintain, both sides, like I said, prevent myself from, or prevent anyone who's within that Black spirit from becoming a slave trader, right? or if you are a Black person and you're working with the police and you're now seen as a slave or a class traitor because you're the theoretical arm of whiteness, right? And so how do you like deal with the sides of that?
Well, I don't know how to deal with it, but I know how to. I think I know how to think about it. I mean, once we stop thinking about slavery as chains, as whips, as picking cotton, as activities, or as points of history, and once we start thinking about slavery as a relational dynamic, which is, I think, even though Orlando Patterson doesn't appreciate all the moves Afro-pessimism has made with his work, and I'm gonna have to talk to him about that. You know what I'm saying? You know, because we got his book into a second edition, Jack. You know what I'm saying? So he has not sent me a thank you card. However, I'm still waiting, Orlando. But besides all that aside, you know, I am mad at him. The fact of the matter is, he taught us how to think about slavery as a relational dynamic. Saidiya Hartman, in Scenes of Subjection, teaches how to think about slavery as a relational dynamic. What that means is that Oprah Winfrey is a slave with $4 billion. It means that slavery is gratuitous violence, general dishonor, and genealogical isolation, which doesn't mean that I think I don't have any relatives. It means, like the cop in the first chapter of Asad Shakur, when he's beating her in the hospital, and she says, "I want to talk to my mom." He calls her a derogatory word, and then he says, "Oh, you got a mama?" That's the truth of the collective unconscious coming through. I am looking at someone who is not someone who cannot be injured, someone who has no relational dynamics, okay? That is the truth of Condoleezza Rice. That is the truth of Colin Powell. That is the truth of Barack Obama. It doesn't mean that they understand that to be the truth. It means that, nor does it mean that any amount of money can shift their imago in other people's psyche. No, they're just, you know, pet Negroes, and I get looked at as a pit bull, but we're still both dogs. I mean, you know, it's not, you know, canine that you like, a canine that you don't like. I mean, and there's absolutely no way out of that, which is, I really understood this most profoundly when I was in graduate school, working in a retirement home for Black people retirement home. There's nothing more bitter than a Black person who's retired, even if they had money, looking back on what really happened in their lives. I am so sorry, but I think I have to go.
Yeah, well, Frank, it was such a pleasure having you. And honestly, it's been an honor talking to you, someone who walked the same halls that we did and, you know, became one of the most influential thinkers of Black studies today, and philosophy in general. So we really cannot wait to see what you do next. Thank you so much for spending your time with us.
Thank you all too. I can't wait to see what y'all do next also. Take care.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.